بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، نحمده ونشكره على هدايته، ونصلي ونسلم على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله الطاهرين وصحبه المنتجبين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Praise be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Lord of here and the hereafter. We praise Him for the blessing and guidance that we receive from Him. We convey our greeting and salam to the Holy Prophet of Islam, the most noble of all prophets, and his pure progenies. Sisters and brothers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We are approaching, or this is the beginning of probably the most charged as well as emotionally enriched area of our calendar. The remembrance of Ashura, the uprising of Imam Hussein salawatullah salamu alayhi, and understanding the reasons for the uprising and the consequences of the uprising, as well as the motives that led to the uprising, are among the issues that have been debated and discussed literally from year 61 up to now. If we were to send somebody back in history, those of you, the rest of the brothers here are too young to remember the 1980s, where this science fiction stories came out. How do we go back in history? And if we were to send somebody back to year 60 after Hijrah, an independent person, impartial in his analysis, and tell this person, he or she, go back, have a look, and see what conclusion you draw, and come back and tell us. The first thing that would strike such a person is the paradox that exists in the Muslim community at the time. On the one hand, you have the Shia, or at least the followers of Ahlul Bayt to a degree in Kufa, that they promised both Amirul Mu'mineen and failed, Imam Hassan and failed, and then now we come to Ashura and Imam Hussein and failed. These are the people that most of them were followers or in the camp of Ali during Siffin, Jamal, Nahrawan, and after. And yet, few years later, they are with the camp of Ibn Ziyad and Umar ibn Sa'd, fighting the grandson of the Holy Prophet under the banner of Islam. Certainly, this independent person, impartial individual, is going to ask questions. What happened? As far as Medina and Mecca is concerned, this is the area in which the Holy Prophet frequented. And they saw what was going on, particularly in Medina. They saw the treatment of the Holy Prophet of these families. Every time he left Medina, either for a battle or somewhere else, the last house that he would visit was the house of Ali, Fatima, Hassan, and Hussein. Assalamu alaikum ya Ahl Bayt, Nubuwa. And then the first house that he visited, when he comes back, again he went to the same house. So it wasn't secret. Mecca witnessed the 13 years struggle and the victory, etc. Sham, on the other hand, creates its own unique circumstance. After appointment of Muawiyah or his brother, and then Muawiyah, Sham turned into a place where Bani Umayyah mindset dictated, not Ahlul Bayt. So this person naturally would ask question, what kind of Islam do we have? And what happened that after 40 years, 50 years of the demise of the Holy Prophet, such a vast transformation and concrete transformation takes place, where practically you have two Islams. The Islam of Ahlul Bayt, manifested on the day of Ashura by Abu Abdullah al-Hussein and his followers, and then call it the Islam of Bani Umayyah that manifested in Umar ibn Sa'd and the rest that existed. This itself causes a question for these individuals to analyze and understand. This is the society that Quran commands them. وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ. Muhammad is only a messenger. If he dies, does that mean that you have to turn back to your Jahiliyyah mindset? Or you should stay the path? This is a society at the time where 40 years, 50 years before it, for the sake of Salat and Sawm, they fought Jahiliyyah. Now Salat and Sawm becomes deformed, maskh, out of its context. 20 years before, in the Battle of Jamal, Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullah, and as well as Battle of Siffin, in the middle of the battle stands for prayer. Somebody comes to him and says, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, is this the time for prayer? He said, it is exactly the time for prayer. We fight them for the true meaning of prayer. And yet, on the day of Ashura, two prayers are organized, one by Umar ibn Sa'd, and the rest of the so-called Shi'as of Kufa that all signed for it, for invitation, are standing there, and there are a few others under the leadership of Imam Hussein and doing their own prayer. So naturally, this is one of the questions that this person is going to ask. What led to such a diverse paradox that exists in society? If you can live with such a paradox where you pay lip service to the principles of Islam, but your lifestyle is completely devoid of any of moral and ethical principle that Islam stands for, something has gone wrong. Another question that appears, that constantly has occupied the mind of scholars, even up to today, books after books, articles after articles. What was the purpose for Imam Hussein's uprising? There are those who claim that Imam Hussein rose to correct the society, focusing on one hadith. وإنما خرجت لطلب الإصلاح في أمة جدي رسول الله. To reform. Okay, that's one view. Another view says, no, he rose to be martyred. Again, focusing on another hadith. شاء الله أن يراني قتيلا. Then when he was criticized, why, if you want to get killed, martyred, why do you take the family with you? Imam responds, أن شاء الله أن يراهن أسار, that they have to be captured and taken as prisoners of war. What does that hadith mean? Nobody says anything about it. Another group of people say no. Abu Abdullah, Imam Hussein's uprising was to remove power from Bani Umayyah and capture this political establishment. Hukuma. Okay, that's another opinion. Another group says that he rose. This is now how the Christian mindset infiltrates into Islam. Imam Hussein rose for him to be killed so that the sins of the followers that come after him to be washed and cleansed. The same idea that we talk about Jesus being crucified for the purification of the sin of everybody else. Other people say, no, Imam Hussein rose. There is a concept of love within this mysticism, that you give your life as a part of process of submission and surrender by which you elevate yourself. That's another point of view. Some people keep asking question. When he moved out of Medina, went to Mecca, did he know whether he was going to be killed or not? And what are the parameters of the knowledge of Imam? Did they know or didn't they know? If they knew, then why did they go? And the same question applies to all our Imams, starting from Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullah salam alayhi, right to Imam Hassan al-Askari. You can ask the same question. When Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullah salam alayhi on the 19th of Ramadan comes to Masjid al-Kufa and sees Ibn Muljam lying on his belly, most probably with the sword under his stomach, Imam says something indicating that he knew what was going on. Why did he stand prayer, allowing Ibn Muljam to do what he wanted to do? The moment that Imam Hassan drinks water, poisoned, although now there is a debate, there are a number of scholars that they say that the poisoning did not take place in one go. It was a gradual poisoning, cyanide that Muawiyah had sent, gradually, small by small by small, by amount that ultimately led to the killing. But let us assume that Ju'ada, the wife of Imam Hassan, put the poison inside this water and then gave it to him. Did he know whether there was poison in it or not? The same question comes from Imam Zain al-Abidin, Imam Muhammad al-Baqir, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq. All of these people that have been poisoned, did they know that this action is going to lead to their death or not? If we believe that Imams have this unique knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant them, and that knowledge provide them with the big picture of the reality, then the notion you are not going to start a process of uprising with the goal of establishing some kind of a political establishment or political power if you know you're not going to make it. If you know that you are going to go and be killed in Karbala, if you know that Kufa is people of Kufa are not going to honor their promise, then why rely on them? And the list of the question goes on and on and on. So this is why I say it is, while Ashura is a unique historical period that we commemorate beginning of each year, but the essence is, what do we learn from Ashura by the time it's finished? Is it simply reading or probing into history and say this is what the history says? The entire movement of Imam Hussein salawatullah salam alayhi, if we want to restrict it, starts from month of Rajab, year 60. Muawiyah dies, Yazid comes to power, sends a command to his wali and representative in Medina that I want everyone to submit, to surrender and swear allegiance to me as the new Khalif. Especially three people: Hussein ibn Ali, Abdullah ibn Umar, Abdullah ibn Zubair. These are the faces, well-recognized faces of the Sahabas, according to him, and I want these people to submit to my leadership as the Khalif. Abdullah ibn Umar and Abdullah ibn Zubair run away to Mecca before the Wali of Medina can get to them. So the Wali sends somebody to Imam Hussein and says, can you come to the office, to the governor's office, and we want to discuss something. Imam said, I know what he wants to discuss. So he takes few people from his family, including Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, and goes to the place. Discussion takes place, and Imam says that I'm not going to sign anything in private, it has to be in public. So we will get together tomorrow and we will discuss this issue. Comes back out, packs the same nights and go. On his way out, his half-brother Muhammad ibn Hanafiya comes in front and says, where are you going? Shouldn't you go, if you are afraid that they are going to kill you, go to Yemen, go somewhere in the peripheral countrysides and stay there until your life can be secured. Don't you remember what people of Kufa had done to your brother and your father? He said, I do. So how can you rely on them? If people like Muhammad ibn Hanafiya or Ja'far ibn Abdullah ibn Ja'far, the husband of Sayyida Zainab sallallahu alayhi, if these people knew what is going to happen, can we imagine that Abu Abdullah doesn't know about it? From a realistic point of view, when you have an absolute power, such as Bani Umayyah's power, that Muawiyah has spent 40 years establishing and consolidating it, you are not going to destroy it with ramshackle small army if it's not properly structured and organized. So Imam knew that this journey is ultimately going to lead to Shahada. But what is the goal? If ilm of Imam is already telling him that all of these issues, Islah is not going to immediately on a short term take place. As far as Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy al Munkar, another factor that some great scholars have written about it. He had an obligation. There was corruption, and because of corruption, a year before, in Arafah, Imam Hussein salawatullah salamu alayhi makes it clear that all scholars, and including Ahlul Bayt, they are obligated when they see corruption to stand up and try to fix it. Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy al Munkar. So there were a number of factors depending on the mind or the person that comes and asks question or criticizes the Imam responds accordingly. What we can say is probably the motives have been all of the above. Certainly the obligation of Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy al Munkar. Certainly طلب الإصلاح في أمة جدي رسول الله. Certainly knowing that he's going to be killed and martyred, this concept of martyrdom. But what is problematic when we read some of these articles or books, that they rely on one angle or factor of the character of Imam Hussein without putting everything together and understanding concept of the Imamah and the role of the Imam and everything that Imam has within his disposal. Then it makes it very difficult for us to say it was purely the coming to for power, although he clearly states it. Allahumma ashhad. Inni lam akhruj. I didn't rise for being vain and purposeless. I didn't rise to grab power. I didn't rise to corrupt. وإنما خرجت لطلب الإصلاح في أمة جدي رسول الله. There is a purpose of reform in society. Naturally, there is this reality of martyrdom to go with it. Fundamentally, those who try to assess Ashura within a small, call it the immediate scope of time, forget that you don't judge the success or failure of such a revolution immediately within a few days or months or even a year after the revolution. Medium to long term is necessary. And we see how this revolution led to the uprising after uprising after uprising from practically a year and a half or 2 years after. You have Harakat al-Tawwabin in Kufa. After Harakat al-Tawwabin, you have Mukhtar in Kufa. And then you have a number of other uprisings around. Bani Umayyah, after the martyrdom of Imam Hussein, saw no peace whatsoever, because in one way or the other, there was one revolution or the other revolution in one part of the Islamic Ummah. So that paralysis that existed up to year 60, that the concept that you cannot rise against the established order. Inshallah, one of these nights, we will look at, by the way, I tried to quickly create some heading or topics or themes for various nights, and I've left deliberately few nights empty in case we develop a conversation that I need to go to those issues. One of the topics or themes that I will spend some time on it is the view of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah regarding Karbala. Even today we have articles coming out. Not only Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn Hajar and others in the past, even today. When you deliberately misinterpret the verse in the Holy Quran, أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول وأولي الأمر منكم. Whoever is in power, even if they are the most corrupt individual, you have to submit. For what? For peace and order. Naturally, there are a number of scholars who say that Imam Hussein ibn Ali was mistaken. He rose against an established order to create fitna. Naturally, they will justify the killing. So we have a complex reality when it comes to Ashura. We cannot deny that the emotional part of it is charged. You just imagine 72 individuals being slaughtered the way they were slaughtered. Even a child 6 months old was not spared. After we just listened to the Maulana, after the Ashura period finished, the bodies were run over and the heads were removed on spears and moved around. Ladies of Ahlul Bayt were taken as prisoners of war from one place to another, constantly insulted, etc., etc. This period of it, the emotional period, we need to commemorate and to lament. But the issue that we really need to focus upon is to understand how can we turn any of these ideas that have been presented and written about. How can we turn Ashura into a modality that we now can imitate and follow and implement in our life? And there are some comments Imam Hussein said, مثلي لا يبايع مثله. This is a general framework of reference. People like myself, they will not submit to people like Yazid. Not I am not going to submit to Yazid. No. People like me, those who follow this path, freedom fighters, those who have free spirit, receptive heart, they stand against injustice, they will not accept this kind of injustice and tyranny. That's a formula to be followed. The notion of accepting, even if we were to accept that there is such a hadith, which there are some debate about it, كل أرض كربلاء وكل يوم عاشوراء. Everybody, as soon as Ashura starts, one of the slogans that we hear about is كل أرض كربلاء and كل يوم عاشوراء. But within a narrow context, you organize a darkened place, black draping, and you wear black, etc., etc. That's our remembrance of Ashura. Did it, what the Imam was talking about, was it this kind of remembrance and Ashura, or there was something else? What he was referring to, from the moment Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Adam, and at the same time Shaitan was there. Shaitan has promised that it's going to work as hard as possible to derail the mission of Adam and all other prophets, and to deflect humans from submitting to and surrendering to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this conflict between haqq and batil is going to be always there. Imam Hussein is only one example of confronting batil. What about our own batil? Can we become part of the Hussein movement in our own time to stand up to injustice? So كل يوم كربلاء كل يوم عاشوراء and كل أرض كربلاء, reference to this. How can we remove the historical Ashura that happened in the year 60 and 61, finished, turn it into a dynamic reality that we will follow on a regular basis? Not just during Ashura program, not only that time, every day. So we reflect on our behavior, lifestyle, and everything else. Are we close to the principles and frame of reference, values of Ahlul Bayt? Are we standing for the same values? Are we defending justice? Are we standing up to injustice? Are we doing Amr bil Ma'ruf in our life and Nahi anil Munkar, etc., etc.? So I really, during these coming nights, I will be focusing on these concepts. My goal, while briefly talking about the historical event, how can we use the historical event to come up to some kind of frame of reference that we can implement in our daily life? You visit all the centers, they all pick up some of the slogans. Yes, Imam Hussein was, the goal of the movement, uprising, was to bring Islah. So what does that mean, Islah, in our lifetime? To stand up to injustice and corrupt government. What does that mean in our lifetime? Concept of Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahi anil Munkar. What does that mean in our time? In those who use the mystical angle and try to explain that it was simply a unique responsibility to Imam Hussein, and we have a number of Shias talking about this, a unique responsibility for Imam Hussein only. If it was only for Imam Hussein, so what are we doing here in commemorating it? Simply the emotional part? Or there is something within the uprising that we can implement in our life? Every majlis focuses on one particular thing. But at the end of the day, in the same manner that after Ramadan, on the day of Eid, Eid al-Fitr, كل يوم لا يعصى الله فيه فهو يوم عيد. If we come after the month of Ramadan and prepared to submit and surrender to Allah and not to commit sin, then that day is the day of Eid for us. If we use that metaphor for Ashura, we can say the same thing. If we come out of Ashura after 10 or 11 nights of program, little with more understanding, however small, of Ahlul Bayt, the values they stood for, and the responsibility that we have towards them. Recently, there is a clip that goes around. The Iranians have seen it, and it has been translated into Arabic as well. Salam Farmande. Greeting our leader, specifically with regard to Imam Zaman alayhi salatu wasalam. If you listen to the text of it, that these younger souls, they are promising the Imam that we are the part of the 313 or 330, that we will complement the mission or create the mission. Come back. If Ghadir was the beginning of it, Saqifa broke it up. The consequence of Saqifa is Ashura and everything else. Ultimately, the return of the Imam is going to be the promise to establish justice and equity on earth. Are we going to be part of the process of establishing justice on earth or no? We can lament as much as we want. But if we come after 10 days of Ashura or 11 days of Ashura, none the wiser, nothing has changed as far as our lifestyle, we don't even get closer to Ahlul Bayt, I don't think any of these actions are going to be useful. Imam Muhammad al-Baqir salawatullah salam alayhi says that on the day of judgment, Allah is going to make a decision based on our deed, not on what we pronounce. It's not the lip service that matters, action. من كان لله مطيعا فهو لنا ولي ومن كان لله عاصيا فهو لنا عدو. You cannot get more clearly paradigm for being followers of Ahlul Bayt than this. Reflect on your deed. If you submit and surrender to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and reduce, slowly reduce the sinfulness, etc., then you are in the right process. Otherwise, attending all these programs, I don't intend to discourage anyone, but I'm just trying to say this is the reality, that we really need to focus on understanding the uprising in a way that affects our soul when we come out. Inshallah, during these nights, we will be able to do justice to it and explain. And I hope that brothers and sisters would contribute as well by asking questions, because sometimes from my experience it has happened that during previous lectures you try to give 10 nights of themes for the lecture, and then during these nights somebody poses a question extremely useful that you need to change things around. So I left a couple of nights empty with no theme, and waiting to see if we need to change something around. What is striking, the way we address it and the way Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah talk about Imam Hussein and the uprising. May Allah accept all your prayers and all the action and deeds that have been going into organizing the Center for Ashura program. May Allah, inshallah, makes us among the followers of Imam Hussein salawatullah wasalam alayhi and Ahlul Bayt, so that by the end of these 10 or 11 days, we are reformed spiritually and physically, inshallah. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.